The VA support group had the highest success rate in the entire district. Veterans were overcoming PTSD, finding jobs, rebuilding families. The mysterious volunteer counselor, Sarah Johnson, was performing miracles until the night a veteran's daughter recognized the voice that had inspired her own dreams. Welcome to the story, Gook. Before we dive into this incredible story of service, sacrifice, and the true meaning of patriotism, tell me in the comments from which city in the world are you watching today, and if you believe that those who serve their country deserve champions in their corner. Hit that subscribe button because this story will show you what it really means to honor our veterans. It was a cold November evening in 2023 when Serena Williams made a decision that would have surprised even her closest friends. Sitting in her Miami penthouse, she stared at a news report about veteran suicide rates reaching an all-time high. 22 veterans were taking their own lives every single day. The number hit her like a serve to the chest. For months after retiring from tennis, Serena had been searching for her next purpose. She had conquered every tennis court in the world, broken every record worth breaking, inspired millions of young athletes. But something felt unfinished. As she watched the stories of veterans struggling with invisible wounds, fighting battles no one could see, she realized what that something was. These men and women had served America, had carried the flag she had been so proud to represent at the Olympics. They had sacrificed their youth, their bodies, their peace of mind for the freedoms she had used to build her success. Now, they were coming home to a country that celebrated them for a day and forgot them for a lifetime. That night, Serena made a commitment that would consume the next year of her life. She would find a way to serve those who had served, but she would do it quietly, without cameras or recognition, in the way that would help them most, as equals, not as a celebrity doing charity work. She began researching veteran services, PTSD treatment methods, and counseling certification programs. She enrolled in online courses under her alias, Sarah Johnson, the same identity she had used during her janitor and Uber driver phases. She studied trauma psychology, group therapy techniques, and military culture. For 6 months, she immersed herself in understanding the unique challenges facing America's veterans. Serena's path to becoming a certified veteran counselor was not easy. She had to complete 180 hours of coursework, pass multiple examinations, and complete supervised practice sessions. She did all of this while maintaining her public appearances and business commitments, often studying late into the night. The hardest part was learning to set aside her natural instinct to fix everything immediately. In tennis, she had controlled every aspect of her game through sheer determination and skill. But trauma counseling required patience, listening, and allowing people to heal at their own pace. She learned about military terminology, deployment cycles, and the unique stressors of combat. She studied the differences between PTSD, traumatic brain injury, and depression. Most importantly, she learned that behind every uniform was a person who had volunteered to put their life on the line for strangers. Her instructors noticed that Sarah Johnson brought an unusual intensity and dedication to the training. She asked probing questions, stayed after sessions to discuss cases, and seemed personally invested in every technique they taught. They had no idea they were training one of America's most successful athletes. In August 2024, Serena received her certification and immediately applied to volunteer at the Miami VA Medical Center. The facility was understaffed and overwhelmed with veterans seeking mental health services. They were grateful for any qualified volunteers, especially one willing to work evening and weekend hours. Serena was assigned to facilitate support groups for veterans dealing with PTSD and adjustment disorders. The groups met twice weekly in a small conference room in the mental health wing of the hospital. Her supervisor, Dr. Patricia Reynolds, a 30-year veteran of military psychology, briefed her on the participants. "These are tough cases, Sarah," Dr. Reynolds explained during their first meeting. "Most of these men and women have been struggling for years. Some have attempted suicide. Others have lost families, jobs, hope. Your job isn't to cure them. It's to provide a safe space where they can start healing." The group consisted of 12 regular members: Marines, Army infantry, Navy SEALs, Air Force pilots, men and women who had served in Iraq, Afghanistan, and other conflict zones around the world. They ranged in age from 25 to 55, and each carried invisible wounds that were often more debilitating than any physical injury. September 3rd, 2024. Serena walked into the conference room wearing simple khakis, a plain blue button-down shirt, and her hair pulled back in a professional bun. She had practiced disguising her voice and mannerisms to appear as unremarkable as possible. The 12 veterans sat in a circle, most avoiding eye contact, arms crossed defensively. "Good evening, everyone. I'm Sarah Johnson, and I'll be facilitating our group going forward," she said, her voice calm and steady. "I know some of you are wondering about my background, so let me be honest. I haven't served in the military, but I have some experience with high-pressure situations, overcoming setbacks, and finding purpose after major life transitions." A few veterans looked up with mild interest. Sergeant Jake Martinez, a 29-year-old Marine who had served 3 tours in Afghanistan, spoke first. "No disrespect, ma'am, but how can you understand what we've been through if you've never been in combat?" It was exactly the challenge Serena had expected and prepared for. "You're absolutely right, Jake. I can't understand the specific experiences you've had, but I can understand what it feels like to carry the weight of representing something bigger than yourself, to have people counting on you not to fail, and to struggle with finding your identity when that chapter of your life ends." Something in her tone made the veterans pause. There was authority in her voice, a confidence that came from someone who had faced their own battles, even if they were fought on different terrain. "What I can offer," Serena continued, "is a commitment to listen without judgment, to help you rediscover the strength that got you through impossible situations, and to remind you that your service still matters, even if the world sometimes forgets to show it." Over the following weeks, Serena established herself as more than just another counselor going through the motions. She arrived early to set up the room, stayed late to talk with anyone who needed extra support, and remembered every detail about their lives, their struggles, and their progress. She learned that Maria Santos, a former Army medic, couldn't sleep because she kept hearing the voices of soldiers she couldn't save. She discovered that David Kim, a Navy SEAL, was afraid to leave his house because crowded spaces triggered panic attacks. She found out that Robert Johnson, an Air Force pilot, had lost his family because his drinking had spiraled out of control after losing his wingman in a training accident. Each story broke her heart, but also strengthened her resolve. These weren't just statistics or case studies. They were American heroes who had sacrificed everything and received too little support in return. Serena developed innovative approaches to group therapy that drew from her experience as an elite athlete. She introduced concepts of mental toughness, visualization, and goal setting that resonated with the military mindset. She helped them understand that healing from trauma required the same discipline and commitment they had shown in their service. "You didn't quit when the enemy was firing at you," she would tell them. don't quit now when your own mind is the battlefield. 3 months into her volunteer work, the group was making remarkable progress. Jake Martinez had started college courses. Maria Santos was sleeping through the night for the first time in years. David Kim had taken his first solo trip to the grocery store without having a panic attack. The breakthrough came during a particularly emotional session in December. The group was discussing the holidays and how difficult they were for veterans who felt disconnected from civilian life. Robert Johnson broke down crying as he talked about spending Christmas alone for the 3rd year in a row. "I used to be somebody," he said through tears. "I was a pilot, a leader, someone people could count on. Now I'm just another broken vet living on disability checks." Serena felt her champion instinct surge. She leaned forward with the same intensity she had once brought to championship matches. "Robert, look at me. You're not broken. You're healing. You're not just another vet. You're a man who flew missions to protect people you'd never meet. That doesn't stop mattering because you're struggling now." She stood up and began pacing, her voice growing stronger. Every single person in this room volunteered to put their life on the line for strangers. You didn't do it for money, because military pay isn't great. You didn't do it for glory, because most of your missions were classified. You did it because you believed in something bigger than yourselves. The room was completely silent. Serena continued, her voice carrying the same power she had once used to intimidate opponents. The same courage that got you through boot camp, through deployments, through watching friends get wounded. That courage is still inside you. It didn't disappear because you're dealing with trauma. It's what's going to get you through this too. Jake Martinez spoke up. "Sarah, I don't know what your background is, but you talk like someone who's been in high-stakes situations before. That kind of confidence doesn't come from textbooks." Serena paused, realizing she had let her natural intensity show through her disguise. "I've had some experience with pressure situations," she said carefully. "But more importantly, I see the champions in each of you, even when you can't see them in yourselves." By spring 2025, the Miami VA support group had become legendary within the medical center. Dr. Reynolds couldn't believe the transformation she was witnessing. Veterans who had been stuck in cycles of depression and isolation for years were finding jobs, rebuilding relationships, and becoming mentors to newly returned service members. Jake Martinez had not only enrolled in college, but had started a peer support program for student veterans on his campus. Maria Santos had returned to work as a civilian paramedic, using her medical skills to save lives once again. David Kim had started dating for the first time since his discharge and was planning to propose to his girlfriend. Word spread through the veteran community about the miracle worker at the Miami VA. Veterans from other support groups began requesting transfers to Sarah's group. The waiting list grew to over 50 people. Serena expanded her commitment, adding individual counseling sessions and weekend workshops. She partnered with local businesses to create job placement programs specifically for veterans. She established an emergency support hotline that veterans could call 24/7 when they were in crisis. But the most significant impact was harder to measure. It was the spark of hope returning to eyes that had been dead, the straightening of shoulders that had been bowed by invisible burdens, the emergence of laughter in a room that had once been filled only with pain. The Miami VA's success with veteran mental health services caught the attention of the Department of Veterans Affairs in Washington. The facility's suicide rates had dropped by 40%. Employment rates among participants had increased by 60%, and family reunification rates were the highest in the country. A team of VA officials arrived to study the Miami program. and determine if it could be replicated nationwide. They interviewed staff, reviewed case files, and observed sessions. Everyone pointed to the same source of the transformation: Sarah Johnson, the volunteer counselor who seemed to have a magical ability to reach veterans that other professionals couldn't help. The officials wanted to interview Sarah personally, to understand her methods and potentially recruit her for a national program. Dr. Reynolds arranged a meeting, not knowing that she was about to put her star volunteer in an impossible position. The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon in May. 3 senior VA officials, including Deputy Secretary Michael Chen, sat across from Serena in a conference room at the medical center. They were interested in understanding her background and training methods. "Ms. Johnson, your results are unprecedented," Deputy Secretary Chen began. "We'd like to understand your approach so we can implement it at VA facilities nationwide. Can you tell us about your background before you came to work here?" Serena felt her heart racing. She had prepared for this possibility, but hoped it would never come. "I have experience in high-performance environments and working with individuals under extreme pressure," she said carefully. "What kind of high-performance environments?" pressed Dr. Sarah Williams, the VA's chief psychologist. "Sports psychology primarily," Serena replied, which was technically true. "Interesting. What level of competition? College? Professional?" Serena paused. She was walking into dangerous territory. "I prefer to keep the focus on the veterans we're serving rather than my personal background." The officials exchanged glances. They were clearly impressed with her work, but puzzled by her evasiveness about her credentials. "Ms. Johnson, we're considering recommending you for a national position that would allow you to train counselors at VA facilities across the country. It would require security clearance and a thorough background check." Serena realized her time as Sarah Johnson might be coming to an end. A background check would immediately reveal her true identity. But before she could respond, there was a knock on the conference room door. Dr. Reynolds opened the door to find Amanda Martinez, Jake's 19-year-old daughter, standing in the hallway with tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Amanda said, "but I had to find Sarah Johnson. Is she here?" Dr. Reynolds looked confused. "Amanda, this is a closed meeting. How did you even know Ms. Johnson was here?" "My dad told me about his counselor, Sarah, how she saved his life. I've been wanting to thank her for months." Amanda's voice was shaking with emotion. "When I heard her voice through the door just now, I recognized it. I've listened to that voice my whole life." Serena felt the blood drain from her face. Amanda continued, her voice growing stronger. "That's Serena Williams, the greatest tennis player who ever lived. She's been helping my dad and other veterans, and none of them know who she really is." The room fell silent. The VA officials stared at Serena, trying to process what they had just heard. Dr. Reynolds looked shocked. Serena slowly removed the reading glasses she had been wearing as part of her disguise and looked directly at Amanda. "How did you know?" Serena asked quietly. "I watched you win the US Open when I was 10 years old," Amanda replied, tears still flowing. "You inspired me to play tennis, to believe I could be strong like you. But what you've done for my dad, helping him want to live again, that's even more inspiring than any tennis match." Jake Martinez appeared in the doorway behind his daughter. When he saw Serena's face clearly for the first time, without the disguise of glasses and altered posture, his eyes widened in recognition. "Oh my God," he whispered. "You're actually Serena Williams." Within minutes, word had spread throughout the VA medical center. Veterans, staff members, and visitors were gathering in the hallways, whispering in amazement. The greatest tennis player in history had been volunteering there for 8 months. helping America's heroes heal from their invisible wounds. Serena found herself surrounded by the veterans from her support group, all of them staring at her with a mixture of awe and gratitude. These men and women who had served their country with honor were looking at her as if she were the hero. "Why?" asked Maria Santos. "Why would you do this? You could be anywhere in the world, doing anything you wanted. Why spend your evenings with a bunch of messed up veterans?" Serena's eyes filled with tears as she looked around at the faces that had become so familiar to her over the past months. "Because you carried the American flag into battle so that I could carry it onto tennis courts. Because you sacrificed your peace of mind so that I could chase my dreams in peace. Because when I won those Grand Slams, I was representing the same country you fought to protect." Her voice grew stronger, carrying the passion that had driven her through 2 decades of professional tennis. "You think you're broken, but I see champions. Every single one of you made it through situations that would have destroyed most people. You came home carrying wounds that no one could see, and you kept fighting anyway. If that's not championship material, I don't know what is." Robert Johnson, the Air Force pilot who had struggled with addiction, stepped forward. "You gave us our dignity back. You made us remember that we were more than our worst moments." "No," Serena replied firmly. "I just reminded you of what was already there. The strength, the courage, the heart of a champion. That's not something I gave you. That's something you carried with you all along." By evening, news of Serena's secret volunteer work had spread across social media and news outlets. # Serena serves veterans began trending worldwide. Veterans from across the country were sharing their own stories of struggle and recovery, inspired by the example of someone who had used her platform not for personal gain, but for service to others. The story captured the nation's attention in a way that transcended sports, politics, or celebrity culture. Here was an American icon who had quietly dedicated herself to helping the men and women who had served their country, asking for nothing in return except the opportunity to make a difference. ESPN called it the most inspiring sports story of the decade. The Today Show dedicated an entire week to stories about veteran mental health services. The Department of Veterans Affairs received a 300% increase in funding applications for counseling programs. But the most significant impact was on the veterans themselves. Suddenly, the stigma around seeking mental health treatment began to diminish. If it was good enough for Serena Williams to dedicate her time to, it was good enough for warriors to accept help. Deputy Secretary Chen approached Serena the morning after the revelation with an unprecedented offer. "Ms. Williams, would you consider becoming our national spokesperson for veteran mental health services? Your story has already done more to reduce stigma than years of public service campaigns." But Serena had a different idea. "I don't want to be the face of this program," she said. "I want to be the foundation of it. Let me help train counselors, develop protocols, and create sustainable programs that will outlast any celebrity endorsement." She proposed the creation of the Champions Supporting Champions initiative, a comprehensive program that would pair high-performance mentality coaching with traditional PTSD treatment. The program would train counselors to help veterans understand that healing required the same discipline, commitment, and mental toughness they had shown in their military service. The program launched 6 months later in VA facilities across the country. Serena traveled to each location, not as a celebrity making appearances, but as a working counselor training staff and facilitating sessions. She insisted that the focus remain on the veterans, not on her involvement. A year after the revelation, Serena's office was flooded with letters from veterans across the country. They came from Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, Vietnam veterans, Korean War veterans, service members from every conflict America had fought. One letter from Marine Gunnery Sergeant Patricia Williams, no relation, particularly moved her. Dear Serena, I wanted to thank you not just for what you did for veterans like me, but for how you did it. You didn't swoop in with cameras and charity events. You didn't use us to make yourself look good. You rolled up your sleeves, learned our language, and sat with us in our pain until we were ready to walk out of it. You showed us that champions aren't made by the trophies they win, but by how they use their strength to lift others up. My unit is deploying again next month, but for the first time in my career, I'm not afraid to come home. I know that if I struggle, there are people like you who will be there to remind me that warriors don't quit. We just learn new ways to fight. Thank you for serving those of us who served. Thank you for showing America what it means to honor veterans, not just with parades and flag pins, but with presence, commitment, and genuine care. Forever grateful, Gunny Williams. 2 years later, the Champions Supporting Champions program had been implemented in over 200 VA facilities nationwide. Veteran suicide rates had dropped by 35% in participating facilities. Employment rates among program graduates exceeded 70%. Family reunification rates had doubled, but statistics only told part of the story. The real impact was visible in the faces of veterans who had rediscovered their sense of purpose, in families that had been reunited, in communities that had welcomed their heroes home, not just with gratitude, but with genuine support. Serena had found what she didn't even know she was looking for, a way to serve that was bigger than any championship, more meaningful than any record, more lasting than any trophy. She had discovered that true greatness wasn't measured by what you achieved for yourself, but by what you made possible for others. The Miami VA Support Group continued to meet twice weekly, now facilitated by Jake Martinez, who had completed his degree in psychology and been hired as a full-time counselor. The group had grown to accommodate 30 veterans, with a waiting list that stayed full. Serena still attended when she was in town, not as the celebrity founder of a program, but as Sarah Johnson, a counselor who understood that healing was a team sport and champions were made stronger by lifting others up. The Secret Service to veterans taught America something profound about patriotism and service. Serena Williams had proven that honoring those who serve requires more than thank you for your service platitudes and flag-waving ceremonies. It requires showing up, doing the work, and treating veterans not as charity cases, but as the champions they have always been. Every veteran who walked through the doors of that Miami VA support group learned that their service still mattered, that their struggles didn't define them, and that they were part of a brotherhood and sisterhood of champions that included not just their fellow veterans, but anyone willing to fight for something bigger than themselves. Serena had carried the American flag at the Olympics, but she learned that the greatest way to honor that flag was to serve the people who had bled for it. She discovered that champions don't just win for their country, they serve it, protect it, and lift up those who have sacrificed for it. So now I ask you, how do you honor the veterans in your life? How do you serve those who have served? Share your story in the comments below and tell us what city you're watching from today. Because at the Story Gook, we believe that the greatest champions are those who use their platforms not to elevate themselves, but to lift up others. They understand that true patriotism isn't about waving flags. It's about serving the people who fought to keep those flags flying. Thank you for watching. If this story of service, sacrifice, and the true meaning of honoring our veterans moved you, subscribe to the Story Gook for more incredible stories that remind us what real heroism looks like. We'll see you in the next story. And until then, remember, the strongest people aren't those who show strength in front of the world, but those who use their strength to help others find their own. Sometimes the greatest service happens not in front of cameras, but in quiet rooms where heroes help heroes remember what they're capable of becoming.